Hello guys and gals, and welcome. Welcome. Today we're going to be going over something rather simple, although also deceptively complicated, and that is the Well of Souls. So the Well of Souls was added in, I think it was like 0.3 or something. I can't remember exactly when. But it's been a pretty welcome addition to the game since, and has a lot of mechanics that you can potentially use it for. And we're going to go over some of those mechanics today and talk about like how you can get the most out of the Well of Souls, what you use the Well of Souls for, and yeah. So right now I currently have an item that's in Omen of Light jail, which is basically where you use an Omen of Light to remove an effect, and once you use that Omen of Light to remove the effect, then you can then try to re-add it. Now, at its core, what essentially is the Well of Souls? Well, the Well of Souls is a place where you can roll a random desecration onto an item. The desecration that you can roll between one of three things. And if you use this special Omen, the Omen of Abyssal Echoes, you can potentially re-roll that twice. Which means that you can potentially have a choice of one of 6 modifiers. Now, there's a lot of ways that the Will of Souls actually is useful, and it's one of the best ways for crafting like specific pieces of equipment. In this particular case, I'm hoping for +1 projectile skills. +1 projectile skills will help me out a ton with this particular piece of equipment, because obviously it's already really well rolled. And if I can get that +1 projectile skills, it's going to be like probably 100 div, maybe even a 200 div item. So when you put your item into the Well of Souls, blink, the Well of Souls will unreveal, or will basically take a unrevealed desecrated modifier, which is of course in a different language, and reveal it. You throw the item into the well, and then the item comes back, and you get to choose between one of 3 desecrations. So we're going to go ahead and do that. As you can see, the Omen of Light in my inventory is gone. This allows me to re-roll, so I get to choose between one of these 3 options, or I get to re-roll because I use the Omen of Abyssal Echoes to re-roll. So we didn't get the +1 skills, so we're going to re-roll, and we still didn't get the +1 skills, which is unfortunate. So we basically have nothing here. Now, if we want to re-roll this item, we need an Omen of Light, which is going to allow us to essentially remove that desecration and then try again. And we can do this essentially an infinite number of times. This is actually referred to as Omen of Light Jail. And I'm going to kind of show you how this works. We're going to go ahead and spend some divines today. And I'm going to give you an idea of how desecration can be super useful for your pieces of equipment. So first off, we need to remove the desecration, which we're going to do with an annulment. So I'm going to grab 1 annulment. Pink. We're also going to need an Omen of Light. So Omen of Lights are pretty expensive, and they're not exactly like, as you can see, 9 divine right now is what they're currently going for. Now how this works is you basically can right click on the Omen of Lights, and when you use the Orb of Annulment on the item, it will automatically cause the item to remove that particular desecration. Now, there's a lot of particular items that you can potentially use for desecrating. In fact, we have some in the Abyss tab here. We have the Preserved Rib, which is for armors specifically. We also have the Preserved Jawbones, which are for weapons. And then you have the Preserved Collarbones, which are for like amulets, rings, and belts, and so forth and so on. Each one of these has a specific purpose. We also have the Omens, and we're also going to grab the Omen of Putrifaction here. And various other things that we can potentially use for this. Now, let's go back to the Well of Souls and get my quiver. And right now it has a desecration on the Suffix. So if we want to remove this, the easiest way to do this, I say easiest, but you know it's costly, but the easiest way to do this is just simply the Omen of Light. So we're going to use the Orb of Annulment. As you can see, it says while this item is active in your inventory, your next Orb of Annulment will remove the desecrated modifiers. So we're going to right-click on the Orb of Annulment, and we're going to click this, and it's going to remove our desecration. Now, there's a lot of rules involved in desecrating items, and we're going to talk about those rules real quick. So when you desecrate an item, like for instance, if I were to use a Preserved Jawbone on this, this is technically considered one of the Preserved Jawbone things, as you can see, weapon or quiver. If it had less than 5 affixes, or 5 prefixes and suffixes, right? It will randomly assign it to a prefix or a suffix. This is only if the item is empty. Okay, so if the item has an empty slot in both the prefix and the suffix side, then it will be random. However, when the item is full on the prefix side, you can desecrate suffix without a problem. All right. Now, there are items in the game. These are called the Omens of Dextral Necromancy and the Omens of Sinestral Necromancy. And these will allow you to force the desecration to go to the prefix or force the desecration to go to the suffix. These are actually really useful in those situations that you want to make sure that you're desecrating the proper thing. Desecrations can also be used in other ways, which is rather interesting, and that is fracturing orbs. So I don't think I have a fracturing orb on me. I sold my last two. They're pretty expensive. But if you're trying to fracture, fracturing orbs require that you have 4 mods on the item. Desecration does count as a mod. However, the fracture will not hit a desecrated mod that has not been revealed. So in this particular case, you see fracture a random modifier on a rare item with at least 4 modifiers locking it in place. Now, fracturing orbs are pretty cool. Like when you fracture something, you basically get a mod on the item which is locked, and you can essentially make sure that that mod never leaves your character. And I can take a look real quick on the trade website, and we can take a look at a fractured item. So we can say fractured yes. And you see here that it's in gold right here has been fractured. So this will not change. It cannot change by any method known to man, as far as I'm aware. It is locked in this pretty much forever. So once you desecrate something, you're stuck with it, right? Well, the thing is that desecration is random, so it's going to desecrate any mod on the item. It's going to fracture any mod on the item. The desecration, however, cannot be fractured if it is not revealed, which means that if you have a rare item that is 4 mods, but one of the 3 mods is a desecration, then it's a 1 in 3 chance instead of a 1 in 4 chance, which is one of the things that people have been using the desecration for, which is to basically prevent the fracturing from hitting that specific mod and upping the chances that it will hit the mod that they want. In this particular case, I don't need to use an Omen of Dextral Necromancy because I have an empty slot, right? So in this particular case, it's empty. Now, in some items, when you're looking at them, they don't have empty spots. And for instance, if we were to take one of these other quivers in here, just as an example, let's take a particularly nice quiver that doesn't have plus skills. That one hasn't even been rolled to its maximum. We could take just about anything. It doesn't really matter what we take, right? Let's find something that hasn't been desecrated that we can mess around with. Okay, so this is a level 72 spear. It has fire damage, accuracy, lightning. So the accuracy is probably what we would target because the attack speed and the plus projectile skills is good on the bottom. And what we would want is we would want another elemental roll on the top end, right? It's not a particularly very good spear, so we're just going to play with it. So we can gamble a 1 in 3 chance to get that desecration pulled off, or the desecration to pull off the accuracy, right? So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to use the Omen of Sinestral Necromancy, and we're going to slam it with a Preserved Jawbone, and we're going to hope with a 1 in 3 chance that it takes off the accuracy. And in this particular case, it took off the best mod on the item, which was the high tier lightning. So it's basically trash at this point. So we're not going to go any further with this. So when you're gambling with desecrations, and you will gamble with desecrations on occasion, it can definitely cause issues. With this item, we don't need to use the Omen, though, because it has an open slot, one open slot, and it will always desecrate to the open slot. So we're going to go ahead and desecrate it. Now, in this particular item, like I said, we're in an Omen of Light jail with this, and we want to essentially hit that specific modifier. So one of the things that we definitely want is the Omen of Abyssal Echoes, which is going to allow us to reroll that again. So let's go back, and we'll try and reroll our mod one more time. And then I'm going to show you some other things with Desecration and why Desecration is even more interesting than just simply randomized gambling, essentially. So reveal... And we did not get our +1 skills, so we're going to re-roll. Boom. And we did not get our +1 skill scan. So we've burned massive amounts of Chongus levels of money on this quiver and still not gotten what we're looking for. That's cool. Omen of Lightjail is definitely one of the less fun of things of Desecration. But the interesting thing about Omen of Lightjail is that it does mean that you will eventually get the item. You will eventually get the item. It is just a matter of time. So let's do another Desecration. This is called a Putrifaction. And I'm going to find a item real quick that is fractured. I want it to be 2 sockets, and let's do a spear. So here we go. We've got some... well, that's kind of a poopy fracture roll. Let's see if we can get a halfway decent fracture roll. And we don't want it desecrated, so desecration, no. I put desecrated, no. Unrevealed. No. There we go. Alright, so we're going to find an item that we can potentially putrefy. Putrifaction is an interesting thing that allows you to basically just do a completely randomized item. These completely randomized items can be just about anything, basically. And when you fracture an item, the fracturing is stuck on there forever. So it will not leave. Here's a nice one right here. This one has attack speed fractured, so let's do that one. Attack speed's pretty universal. It doesn't necessarily cause any problems with the fracture, so we're going to use this one as our guinea pig. It's already upgraded. We want to make sure it has our quality, so it already has 30% quality. It's already been completely socketed, which is what we want, so it's got 2 sockets in there. This is an exceptional base. Now, when you desecrate with a Putrifaction, you have to use the Omen of Putrifaction. This is a Omen that specifically allows you to get 6 unrevealed modifiers, essentially corrupting the item entirely. So we're going to go ahead and slam it. And as you can see, the attack speed is still there, because fracturing apparently works through Desecration or through Putrifaction, which is kind of interesting. Now, at this point, I want to use Abyssal Echoes with this, because I'm going to go bougie on this. So we want 5 Abyssal Echoes, and I'm going to go ahead and buy 5 of them, and we're going to use all 5 right now. And we're going to see if we can make a good item. We're not even, like, halfway through the Well of Soul stuff, so hang in there. Putrifaction is just a fun way that you can take a item that has already failed and try and get something better with it, essentially. So we're going to reveal, and the first modifiers are kind of poopy. Those are all low rolls, so let's re-roll. 6 to 97 lightning is okay. It's not the best. That's a T4 roll, but we'll deal with it. We got physical damage. We already kind of committed into a lightning roll. Now let's re-roll. 98% elemental damage with attacks. That's good. That's a good roll. Alright, next roll. And those are all poopy rolls. Re-roll. And those are all poopy rolls too. I guess we could take the 63% increased physical damage. That's probably the best one of the entire... of all of these. 18 to 28 fire damage is really low. It's like a tier 8 mod or something. That's kind of poopy. Alright, next. We got Mana Leech. Let's choose that. Critical hit chance. Okay. So, basically what we ended up with was trash. But it was fun to play around with it. It's not exactly the worst item in the entire world, but at level 79, I don't think anybody would use this. But it's a fun thing to do, Putrifaction. It's something that you can do at the end of a craft, where you can basically just play around with trying to get a better item. If you fail a fracturing, or you have an exceptional base that just rolled all wrong, it could just potentially give you another chance to get something interesting. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is guaranteed modifiers. So guaranteed modifiers are something that you're going to have to look up, and they vary depending on item. So we're going to pull up a specific item here. I'm going to go to items. Actually, we're going to go to modifiers. And then we're going to go to Spears. And we're going to scroll down to the Desecrated mods. So these are specific Desecrated mods that only exist on Desecrated items. And you can clearly see that in the Desecrated modifiers, there's a tag. So they specifically state Aminamu. Now, if you look closely and you count the number of total mods, there is 1, 2, 3. Aminamu. There is 1, 2, 3. Kurgle. There is 1, 2, 3. Ulaman. How many modifiers can you roll between? On the Well of Souls, 3, right? So if I want a what's the term? Guaranteed modifier. I can make a guaranteed modifier on basically any item I want to. So let's play around with this real quick, and we will make a guaranteed modifier on an item. So as an example, let's say, for instance, we wanted an attack speed modifier. If we wanted to get an attack speed modifier on something, we would be looking for this modifier, which is the companions have increased attack speed and you have increased attack speed. This is a modifier that you can guarantee by utilizing the Aminamu. So increased attack speed companions, increased attack speed Aminamu. So how do you actually make that companion Aminamu modifier go onto the item? Well, it's pretty easy. It's actually one of the easiest things out there. Is you essentially just take an item. You utilize a suffix, Omen of Necromancy, because this particular item has 2 empty slots, which means it could roll between both of them. And then what you're going to do is you're going to use one of these omens. So there's 3 omens. There's the Omen of Kurgle, the Omen of Aminamu, and the Omen of Ulaman. So this one in particular is an Aminamu. So we're going to click on the Omen of Liege, and then we're going to desecrate the weapon with the Omen activated. And what this does is it allows us to guarantee that it's going to give us desecrated specific modifiers, which means we're going to see all 3 of these. We're going to see the 10% increased spirit reservation efficiency of skills. We're going to see the 18% increased attack speed of companions and 18% increased attack speed of me. And we're also going to see the 60% chance to pierce an enemy. So we're going to see all 3 of those at the same time. See, now we have all 3. So in this particular case, we want the attack speed, so we're going to choose that. And this allows us to guarantee attack speed on an item with a desecration. Now, the desecrated modifiers are different depending on the weapons, and there are prefix modifiers, and there are suffix modifiers. Now, some items, like, for instance, rings, have more than 3, which means it's not a guarantee. So if we take a look at the suffix modifiers for desecrated rings, you'll notice that there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Aminamus, which means that if you want to guarantee a specific Aminamu on a ring, you can't, because you have to 1 and 3, right? Not a 1 and 5, which means that 2 are going to be left out always, and every single time you do this, you're going to get one of these 3 options. Now, there's some pretty good ones on here, like 13 to 17% fire and chaos res, plus strength intelligence, plus strength dex. There's skill effect duration, remnants can be collected further away, increased amount of life leech, right? But if you're trying to roll this specifically on a ring, and you want to try and get a very specific modifier, it's somewhat annoying if you do not get that modifier, right? And then since it's not guaranteed, that's just how it works. Let's pick a ring here that doesn't have a desecration, and is halfway decent, not trash. So we can actually desecrate it and have some fun with it. We need one that's not desecrated. There's a lot of pretty good. There's a lot of rings in here that are actually kind of nice. Okay, so here's an interesting option. This one in particular has a cast speed modifier on it, which is on a ring that definitely you would not want cast speed on. So let's see if we can gamble. So we're going to try and gamble and remove that cast speed. Hopefully we don't remove the rarity or the lightning resistance. But we're going to go ahead and use the Omen of Dextral Necromancy, which is for suffixes. We're also going to use, we want specifically, what is this, a fire ring? This is a fire ring with lightning res, so we probably want cold res. So for cold res, we would shoot for Kurgle. Kurgle is 13% to 17% cold and chaos res. All right, so let's grab our Kurgle modifier. All right, and then we're going to use our Preserve Collarbone on this. Hope we hit the cast speed. And we did not. We hit the rarity. That's unfortunate. All right, so now we go Unveil, and we can either go with the Omen of Abyssal Echoes for a second chance, or we can just gamble it and just see what we get. And we got it. So there's our 14% cold and chaos resistance. So now we have a beautiful 14% cold to chaos resistance on the ring. These guaranteed modifiers are a great way to craft items depending on what you're trying to do. Now keep in mind that you can only have one desecration on an item, and you can only have one crafted mod on an item, which is also a thing. Now, in this particular case, we're going to talk about crafted mods for a second. And the reason why we're going to talk about crafted mods is because crafted mods can potentially be a way that you can fix a problem. Like in this particular case, I wanted to remove cast speed because cast speed was the problem on the ring. Well, I didn't remove it. So what we're going to take a look at is we're going to take a look at this item called a Swift Alloy. Swift Alloys are a crafted mod that allow you to get a pretty nice effect, which is the 7 to 9% increased attack speed on a ring. Now, when we do this, we have a 1 in 3 chance of pulling the Suffix. This is a Suffix mod. You can look this up on the panel, by the way, if you go to the specific essences and whatnot, and you look up the attack speed. So here's the attack speed right here, and as you can see, it's perfect essence / alloy suffix, and it's in the suffix category. So it will always pull a suffix because it is a suffix, but only if the ring is full. Right? If the ring is not full, then it could potentially pull a prefix, so you have to be careful with that. So we're going to slam it, and it already has a mod of this type. Oh, cast speed counts as a speed mod in terms of, so we cannot remove cast speed. Interesting. So we cannot remove cast speed with a speed mod. I did not know that. Learn something new every day. So let's take a look at another ring that we can potentially use this alloy on. And something else that's like halfway decent, maybe. It really doesn't matter all that much. So here's one right here. It has 2 stats and elemental res, so we probably would not want to remove the elemental resistances. So we're going to use the alloy on there, and of course we remove the elemental resistances. But as you can see, you can essentially use this to replace 1 suffix on the item. Now, how does this work to our benefit? Well, if we roll the item and the desecration goes on the wrong mod, you can use the crafted essence or the crafted Swift Alloy to essentially try to remove the desecration for relatively cheap. If it works, you can go back and forth like this over and over and over again, trying to hit essentially what you were trying to hit. In this particular case, I could potentially use the suffix, and I could use another desecration, and if it hits the attack speed, then I could go back and forth over and over again to get what I'm looking for. It's a little complicated, but it does actually work quite well. Now, when it comes to desecration, desecration comes in a bunch of different flavors. There is a lot of different ways that you can potentially desecrate an item, and this is kind of important. So let's talk about some of these ways really quickly. So first off, you've got your baby desecrations, which is your nod ribs and stuff, and this is for low-level items. As you can see, it says maximum item level 64, so you can't utilize these on anything higher than level 64. This one right here has no desecration level. This is just going to give you a basic desecration, and it varies pretty wildly in the quality of what you're going to get in terms of the tier of those items. If you look at any item, you see there's different tiers. There's tier 1, tier 5, tier 2, tier 3. It goes all the way as low as like tier 8 sometimes, depending on the item. Like there's a tier 6 mod. And obviously the lower the tier, the worse the item is. Now there are some crazy high expensive items like the ancient collarbone, the ancient rib, and the ancient jawbone, which will essentially guarantee a minimum modifier of level 40, which they will not guarantee you a tier 1, but they will at least guarantee that you will not get like a tier 8 or a tier 7 or something, which is up to you. There's also another way that you can potentially guarantee a higher tier mod, and this is called the Essence of the Abyss. The Essence of the Abyss is specifically an essence that can be utilized on an item to eat a specific modifier. And in this particular case, I think we have some sitting on here. No, we don't have any. All right, so let's just buy some real quick. Now, if you read what the Essence of the Abyss says, it says removes a random modifier and augments a rare item with a new guaranteed modifier. Equipment Mark of the Abyssal Lord. What it's supposed to do is it's supposed to essentially upgrade the item. So it upgrades the modifier from whatever tier it is to a slightly higher tier. So if you utilize this on any item, it doesn't matter what you utilize it on, you can potentially take a modifier off the item and then guarantee a higher tier modifier on it. And I'm trying to find a good item that we can mess around with right now. Let's go into our stash here. And this ring is mediocre at best. It has a bunch of like low tier modifiers on it. It has T2, T5, T4. Those are all bad. On the bottom is a T4, T2. So we would probably do Prefix. So in this particular case, we can guarantee Prefix. So what we're going to do is we're going to look for the Prefix modifier, which is Omen of Sinestral Crystallization, which allows you to use your Perfect Essence on a Prefix mod only. These are pretty handy if we're trying to specifically modify a prefix. And for some reason it's bugged this season, but it does work. You have to do it multiple times, but whatever. So in this particular case, it removed the physical damage, which I think was tier 4, which means it will be guaranteed a higher than tier 4 modifier. Now this does count as a crafted modifier, and so you have to, when you remove this, it'll go away. So we're going to grab a preserved collarbone. And the reason why we're just going to do a collarbone is because we've already guaranteed that the modifier is going to be higher than a certain amount. You don't have to use a high tier one with this. When you desecrate with a Mark of the Abyssal Lord on there, it will always go to the Mark of the Abyssal Lord, guaranteed. And then in this particular case, we're just going to go to the Well of Souls and we're going to roll it. And we know that we're going to get something better than what we had before, but we don't know if we're going to get a modifier that's actually good for the ring. So in this particular case, we got some pretty poopy, 26% increased magnitude of ignite. Yeah, these are pretty poopy mods. But they should have at least been better than the modifier that we had, which I think was like a tier 5 modifier or whatever. So as you can see, we got a tier 4 modifier. Eating like a tier 2 is the ideal because then you can get a tier 1 modifier, you know, as well. But it's still a gamble, what you could potentially get with the Desecration. Utilizing all the tools at your disposal with the Abyss mechanics, utilizing, of course, your preserved Jawbones, your preserved Collarbones, your preserved Ribs, utilizing, of course, your Omens of Abyssal Echoes to reroll the items, your Omens of Sovereign, Omen of the Liege, even the Omens of, like, Aminamu, Kurgle, like, Putrifaction, Sinestral Necromancy, and Dextral Necromancy. I can't remember what these two are. I'm forgetting. I think this one is, man. Trying to remember all of them. I could just pull them up here. So we got the Omen of Dextral Necromancy, which was to guarantee Suffix. You got the Sinestral, which is to guarantee Prefix. The Omen of Light removes the Desecration with an annulment, which is useful if you're trying to essentially roll a perfect item. Putrifaction is for rolling an item that has failed, essentially, so you can just get some usefulness out of it. I've actually made some multi-divine items this way. Omen of the Black-Blooded, of course, is Kurgle. Liege is Aminamu, and Ulaman is your Omen of the Sovereign. And then you have the Omen of the Abyssal Echoes, which is the ability to reroll. And then, of course, you have all of these right here, which are for rerolling your Lobi items. There's also a Preserved Cranium, which is for desecrating jewels, which is interesting. The Preserved Vertebrae is for desecrating waystones, and the Altered Collarbone is for desecrating rare amulets or rings with otherworldly modifiers. These are interesting. Then when you go even further than that, you have these really high-level ones which can be utilized. These are the normal ones that pretty much everyone utilizes, and these high ones. These can actually be guaranteed dropped from the invitations. So if you have an invitation, Kulabok's invitation, and you go fight Kulabok at his full power, you basically guarantee get one of the high-end Jawbones or, you know, like preserved vertebrae and so forth and so on, which is really powerful. Now, a lot of this stuff can be gotten. You don't have to purchase it. You could get it from doing Abyss. So if you do Abyss on a regular basis, and you go to the Well of Souls, of course, you basically clear out these areas. You have a high chance of getting vertebrae and all this other stuff, the Omens of Light, the Omens of the Kurgle and the Omen of the Black-Blooded. Like, all that stuff will drop when you're running Abyss. You can also run Abyss tablets. You can run three, four. You can run 4 of them, and you can also do an overrun zone. So you can have a zone that is overrun. With Abyss, there's a lot of potential ways that you can get Abyss items. You can do the Abyss in regular maps. You can run the Abyss tablets. You can do the overrun Abyss zones, which are really cool. In fact, there's a whole category with Abyss and the Well of Souls right here, where you basically have a upgraded chance of getting specific things. You can get items with desecrated modifiers already. The Heart of the Wells having an additional desecrated modifier is crazy. They're basically items that you can potentially get that just come with full desecrations. So Heart of the Well, Diamond, and you can look for them in their undesecrated form, or you can try and buy them in their desecrated form. But essentially, they're randomized jewels that you can put into your equipment, and they can have some pretty crazy modifiers. Depending on how they roll, they can be ridiculously expensive. In fact, if I can sort by price here, I can't seem to sort by price. Let's look for unrevealed. And as you can see, we have unrevealed Hearts of the Well here that we can potentially roll ourselves. So they're only like 20 exalts. Let's go grab one, and let's go run a Heart of the Well, and let's see what we could potentially get. So he's got 20 exalts. Some of these are chaos orbs. Let's get some abyssal echoes to go with it so that we can have additional chances at the Heart of the Well. Since these things can be potentially extremely valuable, whether you want to go full in on them is certainly up to you. But in my particular case, that's what we're going to do. So we're going to go full in on this Heart of the Well. I'm going to activate my Omen of Abyssal Echoes. Let's take it to the Well of Souls, and let's just roll it. Alright, so the first one, we've got 6% increased attack speed while a rare unique enemy is in your presence. That's okay. 24% chance for your lightning damage hits to be lucky. That seems amazing. Let's grab that. Next we've got gain additional ailment threshold. That's kind of poopy. 7% chance to poison. These are all poopy mods that we're going to re-roll. 5% increased critical hit chance for spells. That's good. That's good. Let's do that. So now we're kind of locking ourselves into a spell item. So we got a bunch of minion mods. That's not what we want at all. So let's re-roll off the minion mods. Those are all kind of poopy. I guess. I don't remember. Let's do minions have critical chance. Maybe it could have some usefulness in the minion category. Gain has 11% extra damage as chaos. That's actually an amazing one. I didn't mean to do that. Well, oh well. 7%. 51% armor from equipped body armor. That's kind of poopy. Yeah, that would have been a much better item if I had chose the extra chaos. So it is what it is, right? You get to randomly roll and try and find something that is going to be useful. If you use the Omen of Abyssal Echoes, you get an opportunity to re-roll and hopefully not get trash on your second re-roll. But it doesn't guarantee anything, right? I feel like this one would have been better if I had hit that extra damage as chaos, but it is what it is. As you can see, the Well of Souls is an extremely useful piece of tech in Path of Exile 2. It allows you to get guaranteed modifiers. It allows you to roll specific modifiers on items that you would otherwise not get. You can utilize it in crafting to try and guide the craft in the direction that you're looking for. You can use it in a lot of ways that I haven't even gone over. Like, for instance, if you have an item that is mostly good, you can try and gamble for a specific modifier to make the item better. Like, for instance, if you had an item that had physical damage on it, but didn't have the roll that you were looking for, you can always gamble with the Desecration to try and get the mod that you are looking for. In this particular case, you can see we have a T2 cold modifier on here and a T1 physical modifier. So what we really need is a flat physical modifier that is much higher than what we currently have. So you could try and gamble for a flat physical modifier of a high tier. And that's pretty much how crafting works with the Abyss section, is that Abyss is used as a way to try and like patch up items that are otherwise not complete, right? A really interesting way that you could potentially gamble for this stuff is, let's do a craft real quick. So if we go to Spear, and I'm going to look for one that has 2 augment slots, we're also going to specifically look for magic items. And what we're going to do is we're going to sort by elemental DPS. So I'm just going to put in like some elemental DPS here, and then we're going to sort by elemental. I'm going to look for like a tier 1 modifier is what I'm going to look for. Right, so we have here a tier 1 fire modifier. We have tier 1 fire modifier. So let's just go ahead and start with this one. This one's 20 EX. That's much cheaper. That's the cheapy cheaps. I like the cheapy cheaps. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and guide this craft in the direction that we're looking for. And in this particular case, if you go to the currency exchange, first thing we're going to do is we're just going to get a perfect Regal Orb. And the perfect Regal Orb is going to allow us to add a single modifier onto this item. Hopefully, it's going to be an elemental modifier, but let's see what happens. Boom. Okay, so it's a suffix. I'm not entirely worried about the suffixes. We can clean the suffixes up later with some other things. So in this particular case, we didn't get what we wanted. That's okay. So we're going to slam it. And now we have even more bad suffixes. And we have a horrible prefix. And so this item is just kind of garbage. You can see we didn't get any secondary modifier to back up the T1. And because we didn't get any secondary modifier to back up the T1 fire, we're kind of screwed. In this particular case, like I would pretty much just throw the item away or I would putrify it. But let's play around with some of the stuff real quick just for the purposes of showing it off in the video. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and kill one of these modifiers. We don't want the accuracy and we don't want the physical modifier. So in this particular case, we're basically just going to gamble prefix. And we're going to try and remove one of the bad mods. Like, there's nothing else we can do here. And then what we could do after that is we could try and remove one of the other bad mods as well. But it's pretty much a lost cause at this point, and I would probably throw it away. So we're going to go Omen of Sinestral Necromancy. And none of the tiers on these are particularly very good. So Mark of the Abyssal Lord's probably not worth it. So we're going to go ahead and slam it. And in this particular case, we managed to remove the bad physical mod. So that's good. The only problem is we still have the horrible accuracy roll on there. So before we go any further, we're going to hit that thing with a chaos. And we're just going to hope that we can remove one of those bad mods on there. So let's just slam it. Hopefully we don't remove the fire. The fire is the only mod on here that we care about, right? So that's the only mod that we don't want to remove. And of course, that's the mod that the chaos will remove every single time. And of course, it removes the tier 1 physical. So now we've bricked the item, right? But the goal here was to utilize the Desecration to essentially fix one of the bad modifiers. And you can utilize Desecration in that way to fix mods on items. Now, let's take this, and we're just going to go ahead and putrify it, because at this point, it's garbage. This is exactly what I like to use putrefactions for, is because you can essentially use these to clean up your bad crafts. Yeah, it already has a Desecration on it, so we'd have to do this, remove it, and then we just desecrate it. Boom. We can take that over to the Abyss, and we can just see if we get something halfway decent. It's actually kind of crazy how often I'll get something mildly decent from just simply putrefacting the item. If you know what you're choosing, right? You have to know what you're trying to get. Those are very bad rolls. It's like, here, have all of the worst rolls imaginable. Hey, look, we got crit. These are all terrible. These are all terrible, too. That is the worst desecrated item I've ever seen. Hopefully, as you go forward, you will have better luck than me, because today I think I've had, like, the worst luck imaginable in terms of the Well of Souls. I failed my Omen of Light twice. I freaking, like, missed, like, half the desecrations that I did. But if anything, what this should show you is that a lot of the desecrating is gambling. Now, thankfully, a lot of the Desecration stuff is actually pretty cheap to do. And as long as you don't go into like Omens of Light or crazy stuff like that, I think you'll find that in general, like, it's not really going to cost you a whole lot. Most of the stuff in the Desecration category is pretty cheap, and if you keep your crafts cheap, you can generally get some pretty good stuff. Like Preserved Jawbones are currently 10 to 1, which means you can get 10 Preserved Jawbones for 1 Exalt. Preserved Ribs are currently 1 to 1, and Preserved Collarbones are 4 Exalts for 1, which isn't really that bad. The Omens of the Liege are 1 for 600. Yeah, that's kind of insane. 1 for 15 on the Omens of the Sovereign, and even the Omens of Abyssal Echoes are only around like 90 Exalts, which isn't too bad. Omens of Putrifaction are only 20 Exalts, and it really only starts to get expensive when you start dealing with the Ancient Jawbones, the Ancient Ribs, and the Ancient Collarbones, and the Omens of Light, because that's where things really like pick up and start to become crazy. Overall, Desecration is just a very easy way for you to add an additional modifier on an item, get multiple attempts that having that modifier turns into what you want, and of course you can always just slam it with chaoses to try and remove the Desecration if, you know, the item is poopy and you don't really care. Chaoses, of course, are just completely random, and what you get from them is just pure gambling. It's interesting to talk about it for a second is that Path of Exile 2 crafting can be pure gambling. Like, it really can. Or you can have guided crafting where you essentially create an item that is very powerful. In fact, yeah, I can guide and craft just about any mediocre item, no problem. It's getting the top tier items that is almost always pure gambling. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching. Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe button if you enjoy the content. If you have any questions about the Well of Souls specifically, or anything that you're not like clear on, be sure to ask them in the comments. I'll try and clarify whatever I can. Hopefully I showed off enough about the Well of Souls to make you interested in playing around with items and like messing around with dedicated desecrations. Like being able to get a permanent desecration that you can guarantee on an item is kind of crazy. And even the rings, which have a 1 in 5, or what is that, a 3 out of 5 chance, is still a pretty good chance to get like the fire and chaos resistances on rings, or the strength and dexterity, or the strength and intelligence, or whatever it is that you're looking for specifically. There's a lot of ways that you can potentially utilize Abyss to your benefit, and yeah, as always, keep watching.